Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of round 4 of the 2018 Sinquefield Cup. In round 4 we saw, similar to round 2 and round 3, 4 relatively quick draws and 1 longer game. In round 4 we saw a draw between Mamadjarov and Aronian, Grishuk Vachilagrav and So Karyakin, while Anand Carlsen was a longer game. Carlsen went for it with the black pieces, but Anand kept everything together, and that game also ended in a draw after the time control. That leaves us with the All-American clash between the World Championship challenger Fabiano Caruana here on the left and the leader in the Grand Chess Tour, Hikaru Nakamura. Let's have a look at their game. Caruana White, Nakamura Black. The date is the 21st of August 2018. d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, queen's gambit, knight developed, bishop to e7, and we are going into the Catalan. d takes e4, bishop on the long diagonal, Nakamura castled, and knight e5 is one of the main lines. Knight c6, we saw this variation as well in the Carlsen-Karyakin game in round 2. I made a video on that game as well. Carlsen won that game. You can find the playlist in the description box if you want to have a look at that game. Bishop takes e6. White gives up that beautiful Catalan bishop. That's the main line. Carlsen played that move as well. B takes, knight takes, attacking the queen. Queen stepped aside, and there goes the bishop. Queen takes back, and queen a4 also played by Carlsen. c5 is the main move, and now queen takes c4 is the main theoretical move, but like Carlsen, Caruana took on c5. Queen takes, bishop e3, attacking the queen. Queen dropped back, and now we see a new move. Caruana castled queenside. Rook d1 was played by Carlsen. Caruana also puts his rook on d1, but he does that by castling. It was all preparation by Caruana. Up to now, the only time he had used was to write down his moves. He said in his interview after the game that he had found this move a few months ago, with the king being on c1 instead of g1. White can attack on the king side with g4 and h4 much more quickly. On the other hand, black also has counterplay against white's king on the queen side. Caruana did not believe that this was a shocking novelty. Black should be able to equalize, but he wanted to try it in one game. Knight g4, going after the bishop. Caruana can't really avoid his bishop being taken, causing his pawns to be doubled. The bishop has no good square, and he has to be careful for knight takes f2 with a fork. For example, bishop f4 hitting the queen, then there is e5, and the bishop has to go back, otherwise knight takes f2 comes. Rook d2 was played by Caruana, and Nakamura indeed took the bishop. F takes and rook b8. Rook hd1, doubling up on the open d-file, and a5, and only now did Caruana start to think about his next move. Nakamura had already used over 30 minutes at this stage. a5 was a move that Caruana didn't expect, that's why he started to think here, and he said afterwards that he thought that this move was too slow. He had expected something like queen c5, more active, forcing the pawn to e4. But he said it's not easy to play this position if you've never seen it. And that was his big advantage in this game. He had prepared this variation Nakamura had never seen, castling queenside in his opening. a5 was played, king b1, h6 and king a1. The engine does not really like the castling queenside move, as it thinks that white's king could get exposed there. But Caruana deals with it by sticking his king firmly in the corner, away from the half-open files. Rook b4, hitting the queen, queen dropped back, and rook back to b8. It has nothing else to do on b4. Queen e4, centralizing the queen, while black has used 2 tempi, playing his rook up and down. Bishop b7 hits the queen. Queen stepped aside, and bishop in the corner out of the way of the rook. e4, rook fc8, and Ka1 said after the game, "Here I have everything, but I did not see how to continue, which is annoying. Maybe I should have played queen d6 to get a better version of the endgame, we'll see. Or start a pawn storm with g4 and h4, but he said that's not easy to do. If you're not sure it will work, then you may end up with weak pawns high up the board." In the end, Ka1 decided on queen f2, with a threat of rook d7, hitting the queen, and then crashing through on f7. Nakamura played bishop c6 to protect the d7 square. Queen c5, hitting the c4 pawn, and bishop e8. The engine does not really like the queens coming off, taking away black's counterplay against white's king, but black understandably does not want to lose the pawn on c4. The queens came off, and rook d6. King f8, rook a6, hitting this pawn, rook c5 to defend it, rook a7, and rook bc8, with the idea to challenge the white rook on the 7th rank by playing a rook to c7. King b1, rook h5, hitting the h-pawn. H-pawn was played up, rook e5, king c2, and g5. Rook f1, king g7, and rook b7. King g6, king d2, and here Ka1 thought everything was okay. Black should be able to hold this position. White is maybe slightly better, but Nakamura played f5 here, which was condemned by the grandmasters, commentators in the studio, by Ka1 and also by Vishy Anand, commented on this position after he had concluded his game. Anand said, "This looks horrible. Even if you win a pawn, it's not worth anything, mainly because of the difference in king safety." Ka1 took on g5, and after a long think, Nakamura took on e4. The alternative is h takes g5, but then rook h1, with ideas of rook b8-7 and rook h6 checkmate, with an enormous attack, as Ka1 called it. Nakamura had 2 minutes left for the last 4 moves. Ka1 still had enough time. G takes h6 is the best move according to the engine, but Ka1 chose the more human option, because after g takes h6, black can play e3 check, and the king has to go back to c1. And Ka1 said afterwards, "I do not want my king to be pushed back." So after f takes e4, he chose the more human move, keeping his king active. Now here, h takes g5 would be a mistake, because after g4, white's rooks will become very strong, with ideas like rook e7, rook f8, and if you play the bishop, then rook bf7, with a mating threat of rook 1 to f6. Grandmaster Sarwan gave a nice variation. At this moment he said, if you take with the rook on g5, that's a mistake as well, because of knight takes e4, hitting the rook, rook back, that's a blunder, because now black will get checkmated. Rook f6 check, king h5, rook g7, bishop c6. It looks like black is doing a good job. Am I going to win that piece? No, white is quicker. g4 check, king h4, and mate on the next move. A very nice checkmate. We all like to see a beautiful checkmate. The knight taking the g3 square away. Quite nice. Back to the game. After king e3, bishop c6 was played by Nakamura. Rook e7, and now Nakamura took the pawn with the rook. Rook takes e6 check, king back, and rook e7 check. King g6, and here's a nice quote from Anand. He said White's king is so cuddly and cozy on d4 or f4 if he ever gets checked. Black's king is going to be suffering like crazy. Nice quote from Anand, and also it has to be noted that if White ever gets his knight into the position and conducts his attack over the dark squares, then Black is defending a piece down, as this bishop is of the light squares and will never be able to influence the dark squares. That's also an important factor in this position. So his king is a lot safer than Black's king, and he can attack that king over the dark squares. The bishop will not be able to help his king then. Rook d1, king f6, rook a7, and if you take here, then king f4, and Black will get mated, which is kind of funny, as Ka1 called it. The rook is attacked. If you play the rook, then rook d6 is checkmate. So taking on g3 is a blunder. King e6 was played by Nakamura. Rook h1, attacking the pawn on the other side. h5, which Ka1 called a blunder. He said rook h8 has to be played. After h5, Ka1 played g4, and if you take that pawn, then you get checkmated again. Rook h6 check, king e5, rook takes a5 check, bishop interposes, and checkmate. After g4, if you take with the rook, then rook takes h5, and this is also winning for White. That leaves bishop e8 to protect the pawn on h5. Ka1 took it, and taking with the rook is not good because of rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes a5, bishop g6 with an extra pawn for White. Very weak black pawns. A technical win for White. So after g takes h5, you have to take with the bishop. Knight takes e4. Finally that knight makes a move. It had been on c3 since move 4, and this is move 46. And this knight is now looking at the dark squares. And as mentioned, the bishop cannot protect the dark squares. Hence it's like White has an extra piece in this mating attack. Rook f5, and here rook d1 is the strongest move with the mating threat. Just to show the mate, let's make a silly move for black a4, then rook d6 check, king e5, and this is checkmate. So after rook d1 you have to play rook c6 to avoid being mated, but then rook d7 and White is winning. So rook d1 is the strongest move here, but rook a6 check also works. Here it was visible from the live footage that Nakamura almost played king d7, which finishes the game because of rook takes h5, nice move, because after taking there is a knight fork. King plays, knight takes h5, and White has an extra piece. So Nakamura changed his mind, he played the king to e7. It didn't really help him because now there was knight d6 with another fork. Rook e5 check is still possible, but then king d4, and Nakamura immediately resigned here. He can still play rook c5, saving both rooks, but then there is e4. Very nice move, stopping a check on d5, and White's next move is knight f5 check, and because the knight is then on the 5th rank, this bishop will be unprotected. And there's really nothing Black can do to stop all White's threats. Big win from Ka1, who joins the leaders on +1. Nakamura has lost his 2nd game in a row and has to steady the ship. The moment of the handshake, Nakamura resigning this game. That leads to the following table. Very unusual to have half the field in the lead. Mamedyarov, Aronyan, Carlsen, Grishuk and Ka1 all won 1 game. Vasylegraf and Anand played 4 draws, so lost in the first round, and Nakamura and Karyakin are at the bottom of the table with -2. Round 5 will be played on Wednesday the 22nd of August and we'll see Aranyan Anand, Carlson So, Karyakin Grishuk, Vasilek Rav Karwana and Nakamura Mamedyarov. And the interesting thing about this round is that all leaders play somebody else. None of the 5 leaders play each other. Allow me to draw your attention to a series I'm doing on Chess to Impress on the Carlsen Karwana Countdown, the build up to the big match in November. It will be the 47th match in the history of the World Championship, and I'm doing videos on all the 46 earlier events, starting with Steinitz against Zukertort. You can find the playlist here, and I hope you will have a look. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. Please leave a comment, I will read them all and I will reply. If you like the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.